manage both the Cape Cod Canal, the New Bedford Hurricane Barrier, and also we manage the hurricane barrier at Fox Point down in Providence, Rhode Island. I have two permanent employees who work here, Mr. Steve Flugel and Mr. Ty Cummins back there. So they're actually going to answer all of the technical questions and give you the correct answers there. But what I'd like to do is just show you our official pointer here. Just show you right here. Okay, so we're standing in the middle of the mouth of New Bedford Harbor here. We're right there at the gates, as you can see. This plan was drawn up in 1960. The facility was completed, when was it, Steve? 64?
64.
64. The facility was completed, and it is the sector gates right here. We'll go outside. That's 150 feet wide by how deep, Steve?
Well, the gate itself is 53 feet tall.
Yeah. How deep is the water level right above?
About 36 feet.
36 feet there. So one of the challenges we have is we have a lot of larger ships now wanting to come and use the New Bedford Harbor because of the offshore wind. And so we've actually had some meetings with some of the marine shipbuilding companies to talk about the dimensions of the gate and what the criteria was for ships that they were going to construct specifically to support offshore wind operations and manufacturing. And so those have been some interesting discussions. But as you can see, the area right here is, as I said, we're standing right here. We've got the hurricane barrier goes across the mouth of the water. And then you have dikes on the land that go down here till it ties into high ground here, and then comes around in Clark's Cove and also prevents flooding into this part of New Bedford. Same thing here. The yellow is low ground, by the way, and so we have a dike. You can see it over here on the Fairhaven side of the land that goes from there to there. Both the Fairhaven and the New Bedford land sides are actually operated and maintained by the city and town of Fairhaven. The Corps of Engineers maintains the barrier here along the water. Every year there's an inspection of the facilities, and we have the gate here. Also there's some gates, gates. If you drive along the barrier, you'll see some large gates that go across streets, and those, in case of a hurricane or a flood situation, those can actually be pulled into place by dump trucks, enclosed and shut down. Also, there's some underground pipes that go out for water drainage, and those pipes can also be closed so that water doesn't back up into the city. So that's the operation. As I said, it was constructed in the 60s, and we have yet to flood the city since then, which is very good. Now, Steve, here's a test, because I know the answer, but I want to see if Steve does. How long is the entire dike system here?
The whole thing?
Yes.
It's between 5 and I think it's like, I'm not exactly sure myself.
Yeah, 6,000 feet.
Is it?
Yeah, I think so. Yes.
Yes. I'm saying 5.
5. Yeah, we can count in all the other stuff.
That's from dike to dike, from end to end.
Yes, yeah. And as you can see, it's broken up here. You've got high ground here, so there's a small part of the dike to here, and then of course you've got a section there. Same thing here. We were parking right there. So you were originally parking there, and you can see the wall came down the land, and it ties into this high ground here, and then it picks it up here, there. We have two people who are stationed here, who operate it day to day. They're also doing the maintenance of the facility here when we have events, either high tide events or there's a hurricane where we're going to potentially close the barrier. We like to have a minimum of 3 people here. And so we'll have actually some of the folks who work down on the Cape Cod Canal will come up here and assist the team that's here. And the reason why we need 3 people, and we'll see it, is we have 2 gates. We have a gate on the New Bedford side and a gate on the Fairhaven side that close when the operator presses the right button. And so we'll have 1 person up in the tower, sort of monitoring all of the action that's going on, keep in contact with the operators in the headquarters at Cape Cod, talking to the folks at New Bedford Emergency Management System, telling them that the gate's going to close. So there's 1 person in the tower, and then we'll have 1 person watching this gate on this side, make sure it's closing correctly, and another person on the other side of the gate, making sure that one's closed. To get from one side to the other, we have a tunnel that actually goes underneath the channel, and we'll have an opportunity, if you'd like, if you're adventuresome. They fixed the lights.
Oh, yeah.
They fixed the lights, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so the lights are, okay, good. So we do have lights fixed. One of the problems, when we go down there, just be careful of your footing because there is condensation down there. We do have a challenge with basically the concrete in the steps, and it's disintegrated in some cases, and so it's a continual maintenance challenge to keep things operating correctly. We have, as you'll see when we go outside, these gates, they're pretty massive. And so they're a constant maintenance requirement to them. We do, this summer, what we intend to do is we are putting together a contract right now, a $1 million plus contract right now to actually do some steel repairs and to do some painting of the metal on the gates right here. And so you'll see that, and then we have the normal maintenance where Steve and Ty are going around. They've got to oil the machinery. They're going to make sure that the electronics is working, that the control systems are working. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into this facility that keeps them pretty busy. In addition to these big projects, it was 2 years ago we did the wood on yeah. Okay, so. About every 2 or 3 years, there seems to be a major project that we need to do. A couple of years ago, we had a barge strike the side of the sector gate. We caught it on video. We're still fighting that one in the courts, or they're fighting that one in the courts. But because of that, you'll see there's some timbers on the gates that protect the structures themselves, and also hopefully add a little cushion if any ships do hit them, which is it's a fairly infrequent activity, but sometimes it does happen. But we have to, we repaired those a few years ago. As I said, we're now working on some steel repairs. About how often do we dewater and?
Between 7 and 8 years.
Yeah. Okay. So so the work we're doing this year, we're not going to dewater one of the gates, the little pockets, but about every 7, 8 years we have to do major maintenance on it, which means that we need to see the entire steel structure out of the water. And so those metal plates that you saw by the car, those are actually put into the pockets there, the gate pockets, and then they'll dewater the whole site, do total visual inspection. Those gates, which weigh a lot, actually run on a concrete track, about that wide, concrete track, and the gates are sitting on some metal wheels. And so when we dewater it, we pull all the wheels off, replace the wheels, grease the parts, do corrosion protection, and so that's about every 7 years or so. And then the little challenges with the little things that happened, like at the last March or last month's storms that we had. We had 3 in a row. The guy, I think, what, 8 nights in a row? What was it, 7 or 8 nights in a row? Yeah, so 7. Okay, normally we will operate the gates for high tides or unusual environmental conditions about 1 or 2 times, maybe 2 or 3 times. It depends on the time of year where the moon is. We'll operate the gates 2 or 3 times a month. The gates are usually closed for about an hour and a half, 2 hours maximum. And usually about 2 or 3 times a month, we'll actually come out here and look at the tide to see what it's doing. And if it reaches a certain criteria, we close the gate. Because of the storms last month and just the way that the tides were at the same time, we were out here, I think, probably 8 times we were sitting out here. And of those 8 times, we closed them 7 or 6. 6, okay, we closed them 6 times. You know, basically once in the morning, once in the afternoon. Once in the morning, once in the afternoon. So it plays havoc. Luckily it was during the winter, so the ferry schedule wasn't as active as it could have been. But it's a challenge for the marine operations here for the city if you know, not so much the fishing vessels or the private vessels, which can wait an hour or so, but the commercial scheduled ferry service, it can really play havoc if we have to close the gates because of storm activities or high tide activities during the middle of the day. No one cares if you close them at 11 at night or 2 in the morning, but if it's at like 10 in the morning, or I think it was, you know, there was like 5 in the afternoon or 6 in the afternoon, then people will notice. But then again, they'll also notice then if you're flooding their sidewalks. So it's a trade-off.